cold and dreary Texas. Actually, it's sunny, but it's very cold, and I believe it's cold in the Czech Republic as well. I'm here with the great Sebastian Dzięcielski. I hope I'm pronouncing that somewhat right. Sebastian, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Hey, so I'm Sebastian Dzięcielski. Your pronunciation was pretty good, I would say. So I'm localization program manager and technology lead. I've been in localization 18 years, so quite some time already. Basically, my job is to make sure that localization is as boring and as smooth as possible, basically, right? So it basically runs well. So yeah, I led a rebuild of a couple of programs in the past. I did TMS migrations that multiple times already. And yeah, and basically make sure that, we have all the automation in place, right? So that my first usually point is to understand what's the program, how well it runs right now. Basically, what's the process? Usually every company is different, even if it's a tech company or SaaS company. And then once I know what's happening, then I'm trying to kind of plug in or change tools just to make sure that all of that runs well. So that's kind of my what I've been doing.
Yeah, one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you a little bit more is because we're in this new era in which the barriers to technology access are lowering by the minute, so to speak, and we are all of a sudden able to build much more complex platforms with a lot slimmer budgets, so to speak. And you are an engineer and at the very tip of the spear, the forefront of this. So I'm going to put your feet to the fire a little bit when it comes to these technological advances. But let's start at the start. Remarkably, there's still a lot of companies that are doing localization via spreadsheets, believe it or not. And why do you think that that's lasted so long in localization, especially now that we have such better capabilities to integrate software development cycles into localization?
I think it's easy, right? Like it's easy to basically put anything into an Excel file and do it, and usually it's fast. And it sounds like a good idea at first, right? And I don't think an Excel file or any other file, to be honest, is at fault. It is just, I feel like Excel is something that most people are familiar with, and that's what they do. They either use Excel or Word, and I don't think that's an issue. The issue is the process itself, right? So if people are copying and pasting stuff from like a CMS, for example, right? This is so error prone, and I've seen like so many different issues coming from an Excel and Word documents, and it's just not ideal for the long run. You can start with an Excel file and see how it works, right? Just to understand the process. I think there is nothing wrong with that. No, when you are starting, you don't know anything. You don't know how you want to kind of do localization yet, but you can start with Excel, create a very simple table. I think where the issue is with Excel files is where you have a lot of embedded content inside that file. For example, like HTML file, right? Makes no sense to me. But obviously, I think the issue is that sometimes companies are using systems that will export stuff to an Excel file, but usually it's an HTML file or like a JSON file. So it's basically an issue of using the wrong tools at the wrong time. And yeah, I think it's a process issue, not necessarily a file issue. And the issue is that most of the people that I even know outside of technology, they like to use Excel because they feel like it's an easy tool to use for various tasks, which is obviously not great if you are trying to scale things like localization later on, right?
Yeah, you're making a very interesting point, and I was actually just pondering whether it's maybe, like you said, an issue of making sure that the processes in which you use your Excel are automated enough, and you're inoculating yourself against some of the manual mistakes that you make by copying and pasting. And I have a quick anecdote that I want to tell you about that myself. It is, I've been writing macros in Excel for 20 years, but my Visual Basic is really limited. And the other day, I came across a circumstance in which I thought this would be a good macro, but it's way beyond my Visual Basic skills. And I actually prompted ChatGPT now to write the Visual Basic for me. And to my astonishment, it actually freaking worked. And I was so happy because I was able to write a macro way beyond my coding capabilities that did stuff that would otherwise not have been possible. So maybe this is a good illustration of the kind of thing that we're just talking about. And I don't want to be hogging your time, but I thought this is a really good example of how you can automate stuff now that wasn't possible in the past. And it's not necessarily the Excel that's the issue. It's a matter of putting the right processes in place there, and they're getting more democratic and accessible for klutzes like me.
You could take your Visual Basic even further. Like, you don't have to even, these days, you can use Python, right? And you can ask ChatGPT to basically create a Python script and basically do this across multiple files, right? So now you can just create very simple scripts very easily yourself. You just need Cloud Code, ChatGPT, OpenAI, right? Or like Gemini, and you can do it yourself very, very quickly. And most of the time it's going to work, although you have to be very particular. I think in the past, because I've been testing these, chatbots for coding for quite some time, and they used to be very bad at like scripts. And I don't know what they did. They probably used a lot of manpower to basically make it better for quite some time. But since I think I forgot which version that was, but basically since like 2 years ago or like 1 year ago at least, it's like Cloud Code was so good at like scripting that now you can use it for even like more advanced scripting for like databases, things that were not possible before. But now you can script almost anything like locally. I think if you want to like go even further, that's when I think complications might be, right? If you want to like host it somewhere, right, in AWS or something as a function, or maybe like a small application, that's where you might need more expertise. But for like simple scripts, you can do it yourself. You just need like Cloud Code, subscription, and you should be able to do it. And also it's a very good tool to learn. If you want to learn coding from scratch, you basically describe what you would like to learn, and now you even have modes inside ChatGPT for learning. So it's a perfect tool to learn also if you want to learn how to code.
Yeah, that's really what makes me think then. Why do many teams hesitate to replace that Excel file even when they know it's holding them back, and even when the technological capabilities have become so accessible, you think?
I think there are a few things. It really depends on the team. I think one is that sometimes you have to invest money into like a CMS or a connector, which sometimes that connector might be quite expensive, right? Some of these connectors are like $10,000, $20,000, like depending on the CMS that you are working with, right? Also depending on the architecture that you are working with. Like if you have like very, very simple like WordPress application or like a blog or whatever that might be, then I think simple connector is fine. But if you have something more complicated, then maybe that connector might not basically do you any good, and you might have to create your own custom integration. But I think it's mostly because you have to make that $10,000, $20,000 investment, which for a lot of people is a big deal. But if you think about this, I remember a situation in the past where a client came to us and they asked us how we can automate this. And it was, I think it was either WordPress or Drupal. And we told them, well, we can just buy a connector today, and in a couple of days, the whole process can be automated. And we showed them how to do it, how we can do this. Obviously, we brought in our partner. I think that was XTM back then, but that might not be correct. And they didn't want to buy it. But when I asked them, okay, so how much time you're actually spending on, manually processing it every month? And they told me, well, basically 2 weeks. And I was astonished. So they were spending 2 weeks of manual work each month, basically, to prep the files for translation. And obviously, later on, they had to copy it back into the WordPress, right? and they were afraid of spending $10,000 on a fairly simple integration, right? It wasn't something out of something crazy. It was very simple automation that basically would allow them to basically cut the whole manual work and obviously reduce the amount of errors that they had, because that was also an issue. So I think sometimes it's I'm not sure how to convince some people, because I've been working with different stakeholders, also CEOs, and sometimes when they think that it's the right way to do it, it's very hard to convince people, and there is nothing you can do, right, sometimes. But I think usually it's a budget or manpower issue, right? Because obviously if we have a custom tool, right, it's not a typical CMS, obviously building automation might require engineering, and I think usually that's the biggest issue, is that usually engineers have like 10,000 tasks assigned, so they are probably overbooked for like 2 years, and there's no way you can fit in custom integration, which wouldn't take a long time, right? Custom integrations usually would be like a 2 weeks up to a month, and you have thing ready in like a month. So it's not like a crazy investment, like it's 1 month of like one engineer of work. But I think it really depends on what are the company priorities versus the budget versus what's happening and what they are actually trying to achieve. And what I've seen, like even recently, is that a lot of time people that do stuff in Excel either do not have time to think about the process, or they just don't have technical knowledge to kind of understand what the solution should be. And
I was going to ask you, how do you help non-technical stakeholders articulate what they want to build if they don't have any engineering background? They don't know what you need. How do you make them come up with the goods so you know where to go with the project?
It's actually not that easy also with engineers, especially those that do not have localization background. It's actually super easy. I used to work with a solution architect who used to do like localization stuff at Google, and it was very easy to work with him because he understood like how localization should be done. So basically we aligned together how we can do stuff, and basically once we did, it was an easy basically cooperation. But if you work with engineers that never did localization or did very little and they do not understand the tools and processes, I think that's where it's basically the same conversation. You have to basically describe to them, okay, why we are doing this way, how tools work, why we want to do it this way, why we want to automate. Basically, you have to show them the money, basically, right? Usually what helps is to talk to the CTO. I think that's usually, you have to talk to business people. Usually engineers, they don't mind working on anything, right? And learn how to do localization or how to automate. You just have to talk to the people that basically make those decisions, right? It can be either like a lead engineer, it can be a CTO in some companies, it can be a product person, because sometimes I remember at some companies, engineers do not have anything to say about anything. Usually it's a CTO with product people, and you have to just talk to product people and basically convince them that it's worth basically spending, like, for example, 2 months automating stuff. But once you do, you basically elevate your engineering team because they don't have to spend so much time fixing stuff, right? So usually I would say it's a conversation you have to have with your stakeholders. Sometimes you have to talk to the CEO so you can understand what's his or her plan to basically for the company, what's the plan for product. Because I feel like that's also, especially in like SaaS companies, you have to understand where the company wants to go, right? Because if they are trying to rebuild the whole product, maybe it's not the right time to do automation right now, right? Maybe you have to wait. Or maybe it's a good time to do it. And I think it's a conversation that you should have, just so they also understand what's important in localization and what localization teams have to deal with like every day.
Yeah, this next question is probably not very fair, but I'm relishing in it, and it's probably my favorite question. So I'm going to ask you anyway and see where you go with it. But why is it that so many localization tools feel almost right, but not quite perfect? Like, why is that? Why can't we get it 100% right? Why do you think that is? Is it just a matter of customization? The tools are trying to cover too many bases? Is that the reason,
I think,
or is there something else at work?
I think there might be multiple issues, right? I think it's very hard to build a tool that will fit any industry, basically, right? I think you can build a tool that will fit almost any SaaS company, right? That builds software. I think that's possible. But if you can do the same for like gaming or like some other industries, like finance, I don't think that's going to work. Like every company is focused on something else, right? Like some companies need privacy, and that's what their main thing, and they don't really care about other stuff. They just want privacy, and if you can't deliver that, well, that's the end for them, right? Some companies want to have like super customizations, right? So they want to have all the API calls so they can just automate anything they can, so they don't have to go into your tools, especially engineers, right? They just want to have APIs, and that's what they care about, right? So I think it really depends, and I feel like it's very hard to build a custom tool that will fit any organization. And I'm not even going to marketing organizations, right? Or marketing agencies, because marketing agencies are even like totally different game, or like LSPs, right? So I feel like you can build a tool for like LSPs because I feel like all the processes or issues that you have inside an LSP are kind of similar across most of the companies. But when you go to like client side, I think that it's way different because every company is doing stuff differently. Even in like a SaaS space, they are using different languages. Even though you are trying to deploy kind of similar applications, right? You are using Android, iOS, right? That's usually the same situation. But then when you look at their infrastructure, at their architecture, they are doing stuff differently. And I think the hardest part is not the software, it's the other parts of organization. Usually things like marketing, any marketing related tools usually are not that great at localizing content. So for example, when you look at things like HubSpot actually has pretty good integrations with a lot of different tools. But at the same time, not everything can be multilingual there inside the same tool. So you can do a lot of things and you can manage that content inside HubSpot quite well, but there are some parts of HubSpot that you can't. And there's nothing you can do about this because that tool can't really support localization for some of the parts well. And there is nothing you can do there, right? So I think it's basically not that easy to do. And even now, when you have, all of these AIs that can help you with automation, I don't think that's going away. What's interesting is that now there are less and less TMS tools that are available, right? There were a few TMS tools that were bought. So the selection is not that big. There are only few of them that you can buy.
Are there any situations where off-the-shelf localization platforms still make sense, and especially in the case scenario like the one you described, where there's lots of capabilities for integrations, like say with Crowd on the platform that we're both very familiar with? Does it make sense to continue doing off the shelf?
I think it does, right? Like not every company needs to have their own custom solution for translation, and I think it's a trap. Like you don't want to build any software internally, right? Some of them you can just buy, and they are you buy, for example, Crowdin, right? And you have all of these apps, and you can integrate them, and within a month you can basically start your localization program. So I think it still makes sense, especially that some of these tools are very expensive these days. So I think that's a factor for a lot of companies, is that, and the reason why I know that some big companies that are not tech companies started building their own like AI related tools that they are trying to leverage. I think that's the main reason, is that like some of these tools are so expensive that for some of these companies it actually makes sense to at least try to build their own custom tools. But I don't think that's the way to do it for a lot of smaller companies or like big organizations. I think it really depends what your focus is, right? If your focus is your product, why would you spend time on building custom tool where you are trying to basically build your own tool, right? I think it makes no sense. And especially I've seen this many times that like usually these teams do not have time to build it, right? They don't have time for custom integration. So why would they have time to build tools that are going to take a couple of years probably to build, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about AI for a minute. We've managed to not for the first 20 minutes, so the time is right. I think engineers often see AI a bit differently from product marketers. What's your perspective?
I've been using it since ChatGPT was very popular, and I think I liked it from the start. Even though I wouldn't get very good results at first. Like I think I mentioned that already. Is that at first
Yeah.
ChatGPT wouldn't even create like a good Python script well. It could maybe highlight where the issue was, what you should focus on, but still, like I would have to use like Stack Overflow or like documentation to write anything. But now I can open Claude and write custom script, even a very complicated one for like, let's say for an Excel file, a good example, very fast. And it's not going to take me a long time to do it with a help of Claude, for example. So I do like it. And I know that there are a lot of engineers that do not, they've been using it and they stopped, or I know some that didn't like it for a very long time and started doing it. And I think even Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, basically mentioned recently that he started using it and he deployed some, I forgot what that was, like a simple application or something with basically doing using, I think, Claude also. So it's definitely possible to build internal tooling using those applications, especially now. The question is, should you, right? Especially without technical knowledge. I think for simple stuff, if you don't need authentication or like crazy architecture, I think it's a good way also to learn what's possible yourself, even if you're not a technical person. But if you are talking about like client-facing things where you are going to store data, for example, I'm talking like maybe smaller applications, then I would maybe lean on like technical people, because they will help you with other things like proper architecture, like how to store or deploy this application, right? What authentication and things like that. And obviously inside a tech company that's easy because you have all of these engineers, so they can help you out with that. But inside smaller organizations where you don't maybe have engineers, that might be a difficult task, but I think it's still exploring and seeing what's possible yourself. It's definitely a good way to at least learn yourself, and that's what I've been also doing myself. I basically
I was going to ask you, has it changed the way you prototype and validate ideas internally?
yeah, for sure. Like these days, for example, I have a not maybe great idea, but I feel like this could work. I can just type it into Claude or ChatGPT, and very quickly I will see how it actually looks like. And usually I will say, yeah, this is not going to work, right? But I feel like this is amazing because now you can actually validate your idea. Like you can have amazing let's say you have I don't know, Uber idea, right? You can validate it very quickly. Like if that's and I think what's better is that you can visualize it well. Right, so now you can use like some of these tools to visualize or even create a mock-up for your application just to see if this is what you are thinking about, right? So I think those tools are very useful, and I know they're very useful for product managers now, because now like they have all of these ideas and they might not be sure which one they should invest engineering time, right? For example, but now you can just run it for like a couple of days. Like few of your ideas and figure out what actually makes sense. And obviously like very capable engineers now can do way more with the same amount of time, right?
Yeah, you're one of the things I've heard you talk about is about engineers wanting independence. What's driving that change? You think is that something you see progressing further?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I've been working with a lot of engineers in the past, and I'm in with contact with a lot of them right now. And I think people see what's happening on the market, that basically companies fire like 10,000 people without, seems like sometimes without thinking, or maybe for the wrong reasons. and they see that they are depending on like some of these companies that can fire them in and blink basically, right? So I think that's the reason also why some of these engineers started working on like their side projects, right? Maybe doing some things on the side, but also because now with all of these tools, it's way easier to maybe fill some gaps, right? Because I know a lot of backend engineers, they might not be as good at front end, right? But like if you are prototyping, you don't need like a crazy UI. You just need something that is usable to just visualize if it actually makes sense. So I think this is for sure amazing tool for engineers to basically start things a bit faster, right? Because in the past it would take them way more time to start like side projects, but now you can do it way faster, and I think that's very useful.
Maybe it's a way of speeding up the bureaucracy as well. What frustrates engineers most, do you think, when they're working at large SaaS organizations, and how does that contrast with people working or being able to work independently?
I think that's the main thing is that most of the time what I see, engineers have nothing to say, right? They don't even usually they have tasks that they have assigned they are assigned to, and they don't even have time to play around and test stuff. And I think that's where I think it kills engineering at heart, because I think most of the engineers they do want to play, and that's what I've been doing as a freelancer quite a lot. Is just I just want to play around with check technologies, see what's happening, what's actually worth using and what's not. And when you have to spend, let's say 30% of your time on meetings, another 30% checking Jira, and another 30% doing stuff, and actually you are spending 10-20% of your time doing actual work, I think that's not the way engineers I don't think it's an ideal word, right? To basically spend 20% coding and the rest is basically bureaucracy, being on meetings and being not very productive, right? And I think that's not the way engineers want to work. They just want to be productive, do a research. And I think that's also something that is missing these days at a lot of companies. Like people, probably for revenue reasons, they are not spending time researching stuff. They're just spending time, on obviously usually productive work, but at the same time, like I mentioned, a lot of times these engineers are spending time on meetings that are not productive at all, which personally, I must say I hate meetings also. So that's also the reason why I'm trying to avoid them when I can. Especially like I don't mind like one-on-ones, because I think one-on-ones usually are very productive in any organization. It's just when you have to meet with 10 people, I don't think that's productive at all. And usually you are better off talking on Slack or Teams and basically figuring out what should happen or what's the strategy around like whatever that issue are you trying to fix is. And maybe then like two engineers can meet to figure out what's the actual solution, but then you don't have to meet with 10 people to discuss any problem, right?
I want to pivot away for a second to a completely different topic that I really wanted to discuss with you this morning because of your technical background, so to speak, the future of localization systems, whether they're modular, local, adaptive, or all of the above. Do you see localization platforms breaking apart into smaller components, or how do you see the future for?
I don't think I have an answer for this. I think the future is unknown, and I would say the same for AI. We don't even know what's going to happen, right? Like obviously there's like this big talk about AGI and all of that. I don't think we actually know what's going to happen, and I think it's kind of similar with translation. I know that there are a lot of companies that are testing, obviously AI agents, right, to do translation, to simplify stuff. Obviously, we have things like Lara, right, where we are trying to kind of create very simple portals for translation to kind of simplify the whole process. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't see that right now. Maybe who knows? Maybe in the near future we can build our own tools, and then then we can create any tools we want and customize it to our needs. I think that's possible, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. I think most of the time these days, it's probably better to focus on product, not on translation solutions. But that's my take. So I don't think that's going any direction anytime soon. Although that might be wrong, right? You never know. There were some people that were saying that large language models are useless and we shouldn't be using them, but that they're actually pretty good, right? So.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Why do you think global systems still often fail at local realities?
I think it's not the system itself. I think usually it's the idea behind people's minds, because I feel like sometimes people think that you can build a software, for example, and you can apply that software anywhere in the world, and you don't have to think about the cultural nuances, colors, or any of that. You can just make something that is going to apply to any country without changing it. And I don't think that's true, right? A lot of times what I learned over the years is that you do have to adapt it quite often. Like even when you think that one software is better than the other, like some companies are going to choose the other one, like, because they like it more, because it fits more to the local market, and there is nothing you can do about that. Like, and also I feel like it's also the way we see technology, right? Like some people say that we shouldn't be using machine translation because of the quality concerns, or they don't like it as a technology, and so on, and kind of the same for AI. But a lot of people that I've been talking to from different countries, they are seeing it as an amazing tool, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to communicate with other people because they don't know other languages, for example, right? And that's the only way they can do it. So and a good example is, I remember many years ago, I think it was like 3 years ago, I had a meeting with a supplier from Japan who was selling one of the software to Japanese clients. And they were using transcription software because their English was quite limited, to say at least, right? So they would use transcription software and we could communicate, right? We would communicate in English and they would see subtitles in Japanese. And they tried to speak English, but sometimes they would also communicate in Japanese and we would see subtitles. And that was the only way we could communicate live without having rely on another third party, maybe translator or that could translate all of that simultaneously. So I think technology helps with a lot of different things. And a good example also is my cousin is traveling a lot. Like, he's traveling everywhere for work, a lot to Africa, for example. And he told me is that he was to multiple countries last year, and a lot of people liked AI there, mainly because in like some smaller villages, it's very hard to get a doctor, for example. And using AI can help you with very simple things often, and you don't have to drive, for example, 3 hours to get a doctor. Sometimes you can just ask AI, and it's going to help you how, what's the medicine that you should take, and things like that. So I think AI is sometimes helping us the way we didn't predict it's going to help us, right? And I think it really depends on where you are coming from or how you look at technology also. Like, I know that there are some people that do not like technology at all, and they prefer to be in a wild, without any technology. And I think that's fine too, right? Nothing wrong about that.
We like technology. We've been talking about it for a very long time. Maybe one last question about the future of localization management systems. If you were building one from scratch today, what would you not include?
Why not include?
And maybe, but the follow-up would be, if there's something, is there something on your wish list that you wish you could include that is rarely included nowadays?
I think I would maybe start with AI instead of TM. Even though TM is interesting and as a concept, I think it's been with us for quite some time, but maybe it's something that we don't need in the future, right? Maybe we can just rely on LLM. Although I think the issue with LLM itself is that we don't really have an AI that can continuously learn basically on the spot, right? We don't really have a solution right now where we can, for example, give a feedback and automatically it's going to learn based on that. So I think till we have that, I think it's very hard to remove TM, but I will at least try to basically live without the TM. Maybe we can just have a glossary, style guide, and maybe our tone and voice basically figure it out in like a PDF or something, and we can add all of that into prompt. And I think it could be possible for like some use cases to live without TM, to basically rely on machine translation and AI only. But then you have to make sure that you update that glossary quite often, and it's basically because that's going to be your only reference together with your tone and voice. So maybe that. I think what I would do, and so if I have to build like a new system, I would experiment a lot all the time. So I wouldn't look at what's big players are doing right now. I would basically try to experiment as much as possible. Because I'm assuming we are building it for like very specific use case, right? We are not building it for any company. We are building it for a company for very specific workflows, use cases. So I would for sure build all the integrations starting from scratch, plus whatever is needed to basically use AI and workflow. But like I said, this is a very big experiment, I would say, right? But I'm sure, and I've seen this. I know that this is happening right now for some companies, and they are doing kind of that. They're trying to kind of bypass what we used to have, like TM, translation memory, right, and term-based. And they're trying to rely on just AI, which I don't think it's a good idea yet. But if you have money to spend, I think that would be interesting tool to test for sure.
Awesome. Sebastian, thank you so very much for spending some time with us today. I knew we were not going to have enough time, but maybe we'll have you back on in the not too distant future. I wish you a fantastic rest of the day in the Czech Republic, and I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us.
Thank you for inviting me, and yeah, have a nice day too.